The veil lifted. Jason Phillis stared at the woman standing before him, and for one suspended second, the entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. This wasn't Rose. The bride in front of him stood motionless in white silk, her hands trembling only slightly around the bouquet. Her face was calm, but her eyes gave her away. Not with guilt, not with calculation, with dread. Jason's jaw tightened, his voice dropped so low only she could hear it. "You are not her." The woman met his gaze, held it longer than most people ever dared, and answered in a whisper that somehow cut deeper than panic ever could. "No, I'm not." A ripple of confusion passed through the first few rows. The minister faltered. Somewhere in the back, a champagne glass clinked against a tray. And still, Jason said nothing. He didn't step away. He didn't call for security. He didn't expose the scandal that had just been laid at his feet in front of half the city. He looked at the wrong bride for one long, unreadable moment, then turned toward the minister and said in a voice cold enough to still the room again, "Continue." The ceremony resumed, and in that instant, Laura Miles understood something terrifying. Whatever disaster her family had dragged her into, it had just become far worse, because Jason Phillis had seen the truth and chosen silence. And men like him never stayed silent without a reason. Laura Miles didn't build her life by accident. She built it in the dark hours no one saw, in the rooms where she had to prove herself twice, in the meetings where people smiled at her polished resume and still assumed she had been invited to observe rather than lead. She built it carefully, deliberately, in piece by piece, until she had a name that belonged to her and no one else. At 30, Laura was the kind of woman people noticed late and remembered long after, not because she demanded attention, because she never did. She had a presence without performance, intelligence without noise, a kind of stillness that made other people reveal more than they meant to. By 8:30 that morning, she had already finished a call with a European client, rewritten a deal memo one of her junior associates had nearly ruined, and texted her assistant 3 changes to next week's presentation. By 9, she was standing in front of a mirror while a makeup artist pinned soft curls away from her face. Not for herself. For Rose. Her younger sister's wedding was all anyone in their family had talked about for months. The venue was one of the most expensive in the city. The guest list read like a financial newspaper and a society column stitched together. The groom was Jason Phillis, heir to the Phillies Group, a man whose family name opened doors and closed mouths. The marriage was being called the union of 2 dynasties. Laura called it what it was: convenient. Still, Rose looked radiant in every fitting, every photo, every rehearsal dinner post. Rose had always known how to be adored. She moved through life like the world was a room already arranged in her favor. And Laura loved her anyway. Maybe because Rose had once been the only softness in a hard house. Maybe because love, once formed in childhood, didn't always grow according to wisdom. Their mother loved appearances. Their father loved peace. And Rose had learned how to give both of them what they wanted. Laura had learned how to survive without it. But when Rose called, Laura still answered. When Rose cried, Laura still showed up. When Rose said, "I need you," Laura never asked how much it would cost her first. That was her mistake. At 10:17, while the wedding suite buzzed with hairspray, garment bags, and nervous laughter, Laura's phone vibrated. Rose. Laura smiled automatically as she answered. "Tell me you're not panicking already." There was silence. Then Rose said, voice thin and shaking, "Laura, I need you to come upstairs. Now. Alone." Something inside Laura went cold. She stepped out of the suite, heels silent on the marble floor, and took the private elevator to the family penthouse level. The door was already open when she got there. Her mother stood near the bar cart, pale and furious. Her father was sitting down, one hand pressed flat over his chest, his breathing shallow, and Rose was nowhere in sight. Laura looked from one face to the next. "What happened?" Her mother turned away. Her father closed his eyes. Then Laura's phone buzzed again. A message from Rose. "Room 1907, please, before Daddy finds out everything." Laura didn't know it yet, but she was walking toward the moment that would split her life cleanly in 2. Room 1907 was dark, except for the light near the window. Rose stood there still wearing her silk robe, one earring missing, mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes. She looked beautiful even in the collapse. Rose always did. Laura shut the door behind her. "Where have you been?" And Daddy's downstairs holding his chest, and Mom looks like she's about to kill someone. Rose gave a short, humorless laugh. That sounds about right. Laura stared at her. Rose. For a moment, Rose said nothing. She looked past Laura, out at the skyline, as if the city might hand her a better answer than the one she had. Then she said quietly, I'm not marrying Jason. Laura blinked. What? I can't do it. This is not a breakdown you get to have in the middle of your wedding day. It's not a breakdown. Rose turned, and now Laura could see it clearly. This wasn't panic. It was a decision. Laura's stomach dropped. Rose, she said slowly, what did you do? Rose swallowed. Marcus is downstairs. We're leaving. Laura stared at her as if language itself had stopped making sense. Marcus, the musician, the beautiful mistake. The man their mother called a phase and their father called a liability. Rose had sworn months ago that it was over. You told me that ended. Rose looked away. Laura felt the betrayal land not like a stab, but like a weight, heavy, spreading. You lied to me. I had to. No, you chose to. Rose walked toward her. Laura, listen to me. I know how this looks. How does this look? Laura laughed, sharp with disbelief. You are about to disappear on your wedding day with another man, and you want to talk about optics? Rose's face hardened. Don't do that. Do what? Act superior. Laura stared at her. You called me here. Rose crossed her arms over her chest. For the first time that morning, Laura caught something familiar beneath the desperation. Not fear, resentment, old, buried, quietly fed for years. You always do this, Rose said. You stand there with that calm face and make me feel like I'm the disaster, and you're the adult. You are the disaster today. Rose flinched, but only for a second. Then she said the thing that made Laura understand this had begun long before this morning. You've always liked being the good one. Laura went still. In the silence that followed, memory rose uninvited. Rose at 16, crying because she had crashed her car, and Laura taking the blame for distracting her with a call. Rose at 22, begging Laura not to tell their parents about a debt she couldn't cover. Rose at 26, face pressed into Laura's shoulder after another fight with Marcus, whispering, You're the only person who never judges me. All those moments, all that trust, rearranged in an instant. Laura's voice went low. Is that what you think this is? Rose didn't answer. That was answer enough. Laura stepped back. Call Jason, tell the truth, stop this before it gets uglier. Rose shook her head. I can't. Yes, you can. No, Laura, I can't. There was something strange in her tone now, something measured. Then Rose reached for Laura's hand. Because if this wedding collapses in public, Daddy won't survive it. Laura pulled back, but Rose held on tighter. You know what stress does to his heart. Laura looked toward the door as if distance could save her from what was coming next. Rose's voice softened, almost tender. Mom said the doctors warned him again last month. Laura turned slowly. What did you just say? Rose's eyes filled on cue. They think another major episode could kill him. Laura felt the room tip. No one had told her that. No one. She thought of her father downstairs, pale and breathless, thought of the secretive hospital visits he kept dismissing, thought of how tired he had looked lately. Why wasn't I told? Rose looked down. Because they knew you'd react like this. Laura stared at her in disbelief. Like what? Like his daughter? Rose squeezed her hand again. Please, she whispered. Just one ceremony, one day. Let the wedding happen. Let everyone calm down. Let Daddy get through this. Jason can't possibly keep it once the truth comes out. We'll fix it quietly later. But if it blows up in that ballroom today... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Laura's breath turned shallow. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm not wrong. Laura wanted to reject it, wanted to call it what it was, manipulation coded in family duty. But fear is cruel when it wears the face of someone you love. It enters through the cracks love leaves behind. She thought of her father collapsing in front of cameras, headlines, investors, shame, heart monitors, funerals. Rose stepped closer. You can save him. Laura looked at her sister then, really looked at her, and saw two things at once. Desperation and calculation. That should have been enough to walk away. It wasn't, because love makes fools of the strong just as easily as it does the weak. Downstairs, somewhere far below, an orchestra was warming up. Rose's voice was barely audible now. "I need you to trust me one more time." Laura closed her eyes, and as she stood there in the shadowed hotel room, hearing the muted pulse of a wedding she had not planned for, she realized that every time in her life Rose had asked that of her, Laura had paid the bill alone. When she opened her eyes again, something in them had changed. Not broken, buried. She said, "If I do this, I'm doing it for Daddy, not for you." Rose nodded too quickly. Laura's face was unreadable. "That's the last thing I ever do for you." The dress fit almost perfectly. That was the cruelest part. The seamstress made one adjustment at the shoulder and another at the waist, hands moving fast with the numb professionalism of someone too well paid to ask questions. Laura stood on the platform in silence, staring at herself in a gown chosen for another woman. Her mother circled once, assessed the silhouette, and said, "It will do." Laura looked at her reflection and almost laughed. "It will do," as if she were a fabric substitution. A floral arrangement changed last minute, and something acceptable enough for the cameras if no one looked too closely. Their mother stepped behind her and fastened the veil. "You will keep your head down until the vows." Laura's eyes met hers in the mirror. "You knew." Her mother's mouth tightened. "There are many things daughters don't understand until they have something real to lose. That's not an answer. It is the only one you need." Laura turned. "You let me walk into this without even telling me Daddy was sick." Her mother's composure slipped for the first time. "Your father cannot handle scandal." "That is not the same thing." "No," her mother snapped. "It is worse." The words hung there. Laura studied the woman in front of her, elegant and immaculate in pale blue silk, and saw what she had spent years refusing to name. Her mother did not love peace. She loved control. Their father's health mattered, yes, but not more than the family name, not more than what would happen if the city saw that her golden daughter had run from a billionaire at the altar. "Does Jason know?" Laura asked. "Of course not." "And you're fine with deceiving him in front of 400 people?" Her mother gave her a look of exhausted contempt. "Don't be naive, Laura. Men like Jason Phillis do not marry for romance." Laura almost said, "Neither do women like Rose." Instead, she asked, "What happens after?" Her mother adjusted one of Laura's earrings. "After what?" "After I let you parade me into a church like a hostage. You will behave with dignity until we resolve things privately." Resolve. Such a neat word for destroying a life in public and asking the victim to hold still. A knock sounded at the door. One of the hotel staff stepped in, nervous, clipboard clutched to his chest. "Miss Miles? They're ready." Not Miss Rose. Miss Miles. Even now, nobody wanted to say it plainly. Laura stepped off the platform. Her father was waiting in the hall. He looked older than he had the week before, smaller somehow. The sharp, commanding businessman who had once filled every room now leaned on the silver head of his cane, as if the corridor itself might sway beneath him. When he saw her in the dress, emotion flickered across his face so quickly she nearly missed it. Not surprise, not guilt, relief. Laura felt something inside her fold in on itself. "Daddy," she said. He opened his arms and she went to him automatically, because some habits are older than anger. He held her tightly for a moment, too tightly. "My brave girl," he murmured. So Laura pulled back just enough to look at him. "Did you ask for this?" His eyes shifted away. That was answer enough, too. Her throat tightened. "You knew they would come to me." He reached for her cheek. "I knew you would protect this family." She stared at him. "Even now that's what you call it?" His face crumpled slightly. "Laura." But whatever apology might have come never did. He pressed a hand to his chest again, winced faintly, and the old terror rose in her before she could stop it. Her anger had to fight past her fear to survive. Fear won. Of course it did. It always had where he was concerned. The wedding coordinator approached, whispering about timing, music, photographers, aisle order. Laura barely heard any of it. She only heard the echo of a sentence that would haunt her later. "I knew you would protect this family." Not because he believed she should have to, because he knew she would. That was the thing about being the reliable one in a broken house. People stopped seeing your sacrifice as sacrifice. They started seeing it as your function. The elevator doors opened. The ballroom beyond glowed gold and white. Rows of people turned in expectation. The orchestra swelled, and Laura Miles, with her future in one hand and her father's heartbeat in the other, stepped into the aisle. Walking toward Jason felt like walking toward a verdict. He stood at the altar in a black tuxedo cut so precisely it made him seem almost architectural. Tall, controlled, still, the kind of man who looked born to command space without moving much at all. Laura had met him before, but never like this. At family dinners he had always been courteous in the polished, distant way wealthy men often are when they've learned warmth can be mistaken for invitation. He had spoken to her intelligently, if briefly, remembered details she didn't expect him to, asked once about a market expansion she was handling and listened to the answer instead of pretending to. But Jason Phillis had never truly seen her. Why would he? She had never been the woman standing across from him in white. Until now. Laura kept her gaze down until she reached him. The minister smiled too brightly. The guests leaned in, the cameras adjusted, then Jason lifted the veil. Shock hit his face so fast and so hard it looked almost like anger. His eyes snapped to hers. "You are not her." "No, I'm not." "What is this?" Laura held his gaze even as her pulse thundered. "A disaster." Something flickered in his expression then, not confusion. Assessment. He looked past her once, toward the front row where her mother sat rigid and pale, toward her father, whose hand gripped the armrest, toward the hundreds of witnesses gathered to watch power marry beauty. Then his eyes came back to Laura. She braced for it, for humiliation, exposure, the brutal clean cut of public truth. Instead, he straightened. "Continue," he said. Laura nearly forgot how to breathe. The minister stumbled back into the vows. Jason's hand around hers was cool and firm. Not reassuring, not punishing, just inescapably real. She answered when prompted. So did he. The applause at the end sounded obscene. They signed papers in a private room behind the ballroom. 2 witnesses, 1 attorney, a mountain of legal language no one present was naive enough to call romantic. When the last signature dried, Jason dismissed everyone with a glance. The door shut, silence rushed in. Laura stood near the table, bouquet set aside, veil removed. Jason remained by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other loosened at his side as if restraint itself were a physical effort. He didn't look at her immediately. When he did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You have 5 seconds," he said, "to tell me why I just married the wrong woman." Laura answered plainly. "Rose left. I gathered that. She intended to run before the ceremony. And your family decided fraud was a more elegant solution." Laura swallowed. "My father's condition worsened this morning. They were afraid the scandal would trigger another episode." Jason's face did not change. "So they offered me a substitute bride." "I wasn't offered." "No?" She met his gaze. "I was cornered." Something in his expression shifted at that. Slightly, not softened, recalibrated. He stepped closer. "Did you come down that aisle willingly?" Laura's laugh was small and tired. "There was nothing willing about it." "Yet you came." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was afraid my father might die. Because your family name and mine are tied to people who treat daughters like currency. Because my sister knew exactly where to press the knife." But Laura had already been stripped of enough today. She would not stand here and plead for mercy from a man who had every reason to despise her. So she said, "Because once it reached me, there was no version of this that didn't ruin someone." Jason studied her. You could have told me at the altar." "Yes? Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't know what you would do." "And now," she held his gaze, "I still don't." For the first time since the veil lifted, Jason's mouth curved, not in amusement, in disbelief. "You think you're the one taking the bigger risk here?" "I think," Laura said evenly, "that whatever you've lost today, I lost before I started walking." That landed. She could see it. Not because he liked what she said, because he knew it was true. Jason turned away, shoulders rigid, and looked out over the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "This marriage cannot be unwound in an afternoon. There are contracts attached to today. Markets will react. Boards will ask questions." Laura let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "I know. So, until I decide how to handle this, you will remain exactly what this certificate says you are. His wife." He didn't say the words. He didn't need to. Laura's spine locked. Jason faced her again. But understand me clearly, Laura. I will find out who knew, when they knew it, and what each of them thought this would cost me. And me? She asked before she could stop herself. His eyes held hers. That, he said, depends on whether you're telling me the truth. Laura nodded once. Then, with what little dignity she had left, she picked up the bouquet she never wanted and walked out of the room still wearing his name. The penthouse Jason moved her into had walls of glass, floors the color of ash, and more silence than any place Laura had ever lived. It sat high above the city like a statement, precise, expensive, untouchable. For the first 3 days, Jason treated her like an unstable variable in a hostile equation. There was no shouting, no melodrama. That would have been easier. Instead, there were schedules. His assistant delivered a list of household protocols as if Laura were a foreign dignitary with temporary clearance. A separate suite was prepared on the far side of the residence. Staff were instructed to address her as Mrs. Phillis. An attorney contacted her about confidentiality, public appearances, and image preservation. Image preservation. Laura read the phrase twice, then signed because humiliation had already passed the point where paperwork could worsen it. Jason was gone most of the day and unreachable most of the night. When they crossed paths, he was courteous in the ruthless way of a man refusing to be careless with his own emotions. Your car is downstairs. Dinner is at 8 if you plan to attend. You'll need to review the guest list before Thursday. Not one unnecessary word, not one apology. Good, Laura told herself. It was easier that way. She threw herself into the work she still had. Her firm had granted a week of leave after the unexpected extension of wedding events, but Laura knew curiosity had already become gossip, and gossip would soon become consequence. She made calls, sent emails, worked from the suite desk with a view of the river and a knot behind her ribs that never fully dissolved. At night, when the city glittered beneath the windows, she thought of the life she had stepped out of in one morning. Her apartment, her meetings, her name before it had become a headline adjacent to a scandal. And she thought of Rose, who had vanished so completely the first week that even their mother's calls went unanswered. Rose, who had sent exactly one message after the ceremony. Thank you. I'm sorry. I had no choice. Laura had stared at those 3 sentences until anger turned from fire into something cleaner and colder. Then she deleted them. By the second week, Jason's investigation had apparently begun yielding results. She knew because he started looking at her differently, longer, not warmly, not yet, but no longer as if she were a convenient extension of the betrayal. One evening she came home from a call to find him in the kitchen, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, a file open on the counter beside a glass of whiskey. He glanced at her, then at the file, then back. You were telling the truth. Laura set her bag down slowly. About which part? That your sister left before dawn, that your mother contacted legal before contacting me, that your father's physician was on site by 9. There was a pause, then he added, that you were not the architect. Laura leaned against the doorframe. Was there a chance I was? Jason took a sip of whiskey. There is always a chance people are more ambitious than they look. And was that what you thought of me? He considered that with irritating sincerity. No, he said. I thought you were more disciplined than most people under pressure. Laura almost smiled. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. It isn't. Of course not. For the first time, the corner of his mouth shifted. Small, brief. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. That unsettled her more than his coldness ever had. A few days later, the first real social event arrived. A charity dinner, cameras, investors, bored spouses, the kind of room where scandal wore diamonds and asked polite questions over champagne. Laura descended the staircase in black satin and found Jason waiting at the bottom, already dressed, expression unreadable. His gaze lifted to her and stayed there a beat too long. Then he said, "You're late." She glanced at the clock. "I'm 2 minutes early." Then I was early. Congratulations. His eyes narrowed, but there was something almost alive in them now. Friction. Awareness. They rode to the event in silence. Inside, the whispers started exactly when she expected them to. That's not the sister. How awkward. Wasn't there some issue with the ceremony? I heard the family forced it. I heard she planned it. Laura kept her head high. But Jason kept one hand at the base of her back as they moved through the room, and though the touch was probably strategic, it burned through the silk like a claim. At one point, an older woman with a jeweled smile approached them. "Mrs. Phillis," she said, looking Laura up and down with surgical curiosity. "What a surprise you turned out to be." Before Laura could answer, Jason said coolly, "Only to people who weren't paying attention." The woman blinked. Laura turned to look at him, genuinely caught off guard. He didn't return the glance, just guided her onward through the room as though shutting people down on her behalf cost him nothing. But later, in the car home, she said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." Jason kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He was silent long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because they were trying to humiliate you." Laura gave a small, humorless laugh. "That ship has sailed." "No," he said, voice firmer now. "Public amusement is not the same as humiliation. Humiliation only works if you agree to carry it." She turned to him. City lights moved across his face in fragments, cold cheekbone, hard mouth, eyes that looked carved from restraint. "And do you?" he asked. "Do I what?" "Carry it." Laura looked out the window. After a moment she said, "I carry what's useful. The rest I survive." Something changed in the car after that. Not peace, something more dangerous, recognition. But she had no idea that the real battle was still coming, because the woman who started it all was on her way back, and in part 2, everything would unravel. Stay tuned.